Alright my friends, back with part 3 of our tune port injection teardown video. We have completed our first steps of removing our air intake system, throttle body center plenum, and distributor cover. We've moved on through our second section, where on the second section what I did was remove our intake runners. Pause for a second there while I figure out what I'm trying to say. And our valve covers, and we've got that done. Now we're going to move on to step 3, which will be our last 2 components to remove from the car. What we're going to work on today is, of course, we're going to get the distributor out of here, and we're going to go ahead and remove the actual intake manifold, the lower intake manifold on the car here. So this here, right now, for those of you that don't know or just haven't dug this deep in your cars before, now the distributor obviously controls your spark to your cylinders, right? But it's going to have to be in a very specific spot, because if you stab this back in here again in the incorrect position, it's not going to be firing correctly for you. Now on GMs, I think Ford does it too, but GM kind of tries to help you out. So if you look on every one of your intake manifolds, I think even back in the 50s we did it, or they did it too, you've got your firing order. So on the General Motors, typically your firing order is going to be a 18436572, which refers to your cylinder firing order. So it essentially goes back into a crisscross pattern across this V8 engine to balance it out. And then you've always got a externally balanced harmonic balancer on most of them too. But I'm not going to get into that too deep today. I'll save that for another video if you guys have an interest. But on the distributor, obviously it has to be rotating and sending spark exactly at the right moment to each individual cylinder, as that cylinder is on your compression stroke, at the top of its compression stroke. So what we do here, you can either rotate your distributor around manually to the number 1 position, which again, that's another video I won't get into today, or you can do kind of like what I did. I just usually take a straight edge against my manifold, and then what I want to do is figure out where it's at. Just use a good old fancy ruler and my Sharpie, and then I can see where my rotor is facing. So I'm back at this position here, which actually I'm right at almost number 1 position as it is. So also on these GM distributors, to pull these out, these do not require a whole lot. Now I've loosened that bolt up already, so what you're going to see is, you see how that shaft is turning already. Now what that does, it allows us to adjust our initial timing set inside the car to either advance the timing or retard the timing in relation to where the motor is at, or the cylinder is at on the compression stroke when it fires. So it gives you, a lot of times hot rodders, old schoolers, will go with a 4 degrees before or 4 degrees after, depending on what kind of cam you've got in there. But for our purposes, we're just going back straight stock. This isn't a hot rod. I mean, it's a hot rod from the factory, but it's an 80s hot rod, so it's not like I'm juicing it up right now. I'm just getting it back together. So just an aside on that. So you can see the only thing holding this distributor in is that one little bolt right there. And why do I have an extra bolt there? That's interesting. Okay. That wasn't supposed to be there. Maybe they lost that from last time they took it apart. So we're going to remove this distributor clamp bolt down. This is just a straight old 9/16. I'm going to take that off of there. And what you'll see is the clamp is kind of a, as I lose my washer there. The clamp is just a kind of a half semicircle shape there that holds that distributor in place, the shaft of the distributor in place. Yeah, we're going to get that out of the way. And then what I'm going to do is I pull straight up on our distributor, right? And you can see it coming out there. And what my rotor is going to be doing is my rotor turns to the back. Did you see that? So the rotor is always going to move clockwise as you insert it, because the gears are beveled. They're not a straight angle gear on the back of the camshaft. So as you're pulling out, they're going to turn that way. So let me show you from a wide angle so you can see what I'm doing. As I pull, see that move subtly back that way? And that's going to allow you to know that you've got it seated again. Okay? Now this also drives the oil pump as well, so you want to make sure everything's seated up. Sometimes the oil pump shaft comes in the wrong direction, and then you kind of get stuck there. But you can see how much that turned to the back, and then our distributor comes straight out of the car. So not very hard, just you want to make sure you get your positioning correct. And actually that's a really still good looking distributor. If they hadn't stripped the screw holes there, because that was part of the problem I ended up having, was the screw holes for the distributor were stripped. They're tiny on these F-bodies. I think a lot of the trucks use these too, and then the distributor wouldn't hold back down again. So anyway, all right, now what's left for us here on our adventure is 12 more bolts. So you've got 2 here, 2 here, 2 here, and then 6 more on the other side. Now you notice too, this is a later 88 motor, so it has the different intake where the bolts tend to go straight down, the center bolts, versus in an angle of the older cars, the 2-piece rear main steel blocks. This is more the Vortex style, so you can actually put Vortex heads on these. The D-port, the Corvette aluminum heads will go on these motors. In fact, this is an L98 like a Corvette. It just has steel heads versus aluminum. So let me get set up with my tools here real quick, and then I'll show you guys. We're going to remove these last 12 bolts and that bracket over there in the corner, and our lower intake is going to be off. So I'll be right back with you. Hang tight. Okay, down to the last final 12 bolts here. So we're going to go ahead and start getting this squared away. So I'm just basically going to remove these 12 bolts front to rear on this, and of course I've already loosened these up so I can get to them without too much trouble to make sure they would all come out for me. So we're going to get these out of here, and if you'll look closely you'll be able to tell that these are fairly closely matched to where your intake ports are at, and obviously they want to tighten them down. And of course your water jacket, the first one actually is your water jacket, where that comes through, because you want to separate that water from the rest of it. So we're going to get these out of here. There's number 4 there. That bolt's kind of getting in my way. There's 1, 2. There's our other one here. Of course, that bracket that holds the EGR switch is underneath these bolts here. And if you didn't see, I did a video on the vacuum system on this tune port and what it controls, where it goes to. The bolt's a little longer than I'm remembering. There we go. And of course, just dirtier. And of course, before we get this all back together, we're going to want to clean up our hardware too. One of the things about it. Now, another thing too you want to remember is the bolts on the intake side are a different size than the runners and intake, upper intake, so you don't want to get them mixed up. They physically won't go in there anyway. But just as an aside, get this bolt out of the way here real quick. So there's another one. Here's number 7. I'm going to put that one back in there so I don't lose it, as I almost drop it. It just doesn't want to find its way back home. Okay. Get this out of here. And you'll notice these back 2 bolts on here and the front 2 are going to be coated with old gasket sealer material, because as you put this small block Chevy together, small block Chevy, basically, see the ones in the center don't really have it that much. It keeps the water from escaping through the threaded portion of the bolts. It's one of those weird peculiarities of the older motors that they just had to do. So what we're going to do here, so we get number 11 out. I thought I had number 11 out. You see all that gasket material on there, on that one. And there's number 12. Okay, so let's see, sometimes these intakes will come straight off. I'm going to go ahead and pull that out of the way. And I'm just going to take my bolts off of here so I don't get messed up on this. I don't know where that one came from. Okay. Take my distributor bolt and carrier off of here. And I'm going to grab my screwdriver. So most of the time you can gently pry on your corners here. There we go. Without too much manipulation. There it goes. There we go. And it comes off. So I'm going to put this one back in there again. Now I'm just going to go straight up with this one. I need to disconnect to my EGR switch right there. And we're going to come, get that back section removed. The gasket material still stuck back there. There we go. There we go. Okay. And we're just going to lift straight up and out. And there's our intake manifold. Okay. So you can see there's our valley, and it's rather filthy, so we're going to be cleaning that up quite a bit because it's dirty. And there's our old gaskets there. Of course, this is a roller lifter motor, so this is your center retainer to hold down your keepers for your roller lifters. Some sludge buildup in there. Like I said, we're going to clean this baby up, make it look nice before we get it all back together again. And of course, there's our lower intake. So, pretty much no fuss, no muss. This actually was probably the easiest part of the entire process to get that one off of there. So now we're down to what we call our long block assembly. But you know, it's not terrible in here for a 32-year-old motor. Oh, and look, here's what's fun, guys. See that right there, that number? 10108482. That intake manifold's never been off here before. That's the original part number from GM for the intake. So, well, I guess it was about time to do that anyway. So, what I'm gonna do next episode, more than likely, is do a little cleanup on this. I may be able to show you guys what I'm doing as far as the cleanup goes. One-handed, we'll see how it goes. You can see back there, that's just our water jacket. You see the antifreeze in there. And we're going to clean up the firewall just a bit to kind of get this from being so grungy, and we'll go from there. So that's going to wrap it up today for episode 3 here. Appreciate you keeping and sticking around to the end, humoring me. And I will catch you guys next time. I'll probably put another video out a few more days after this one posts. So I'll keep this going until we get this thing back together again, okay? All right, guys. Talk to you then. Have a safe week, or a good week.